In this video, we're going to talk about the differences between absorption costing and variable costing. So if you remember from our previous videos, these are two different methods that are used when we compute product costs and ultimately cost of goods sold for a manufacturing firm. And so the key functional difference in how we would compute product cost differently is that with absorption costing, fixed overhead is treated as a product cost or inventoriable cost in the sense that it gets attached to the product and flows through cost of goods sold. Whereas with variable costing method, fixed overhead is treated as a period cost. And if you remember, a period cost is something like SG&A expense, where it's just expensed as it's incurred. It's not attached to the product or flowing through as inventory or anything like that. So this is a very subtle difference of how we treat fixed overhead as a product cost or period cost. And you might be wondering, hey, aren't we just rearranging cards in the same deck here? What does this even matter? Why is it important? Whether, as ultimately we end up expensing all this at some point, so who cares? Well, actually, this can make a really big difference in terms of how managers interpret information, what quarter or year looks more profitable than another period. So let's get into an example, and we'll talk about how this can create some problems. So let's say your firm makes hot air balloons, and in the first quarter of the year, you sell 10 hot air balloons, you make 10, and by make, I mean you manufacture them. And then in quarter two, you're going to manufacture 20 hot air balloons, and you're going to sell 10 of them. So let's say, let me just scroll down here. So your selling price, we're going to need some of this info here. Your selling price per unit, you sell each balloon for $80,000. The direct material per unit is $25,000. Direct labor is $10,000. Variable overhead per unit is $2,000. And then we've got fixed overhead we're going to do per quarter. So it's $60,000 per quarter. Okay. Now that's going to become important in a moment. So now we need to compute the product costs, which is going to be different under absorption costing and variable costing because of the way that we treat the fixed overhead. So basically the fixed overhead is going to become part of the product cost when we're dealing with absorption costing. Whereas with variable costing, we're just going to ignore it when we compute the product cost. So under quarter one for absorption costing, we got $43,000 is our product cost per unit. We're going to use that when we go to compute cost of goods sold for quarter one. For quarter two, it's $40,000. Now you might be wondering, hey, wait a minute. Why is it different for each quarter for absorption costing? Well, if you would check out our video that we have on absorption costing, that'll explain more detail. Briefly, I'll just tell you that because we produce more units than we sell in quarter two, right? We're making 20 hot air balloons that quarter, but we're only selling 10. That means we're building up some inventory. And because fixed overhead is getting attached to the inventory, to the product, that means that some of this $60,000 is going to not be incurred in this quarter, but is actually going to go and flow to inventory and be dealt with in some future quarter. So because we have a little bit of an inventory buildup in this quarter, it's actually going to spread this fixed overhead over a larger number of units, some of which are not sold this quarter, and they're going to be dealt with later. And so that's actually going to reduce our product costs, even though nothing has changed about our cost structure. Okay, now for variable, we have the same thing each quarter because nothing has changed about our cost structure, and we're not having this issue with the fixed overhead. Now, we're going to use those product costs to put together an income statement. We're going to have an absorption cost income statement, and then we're going to have a variable cost income statement. So let's deal with the absorption cost income statement first. Right now, we sell 10 products in each period. That means 10 products are going to flow through cost of goods sold. So to get the cost of goods sold, you just take 10 times 43,000 for quarter one. That's 433,000. And then 10 times 40,000 for quarter two, which is 400,000. The sales is just the $80,000 selling price per balloon times 10. And then that's going to give us, and we're just going to ignore SG&A and things like that. And we're just going to skip right to our net income, right? Make this a little bit easier. So it looks like our net income is actually higher. The firm is more profitable in quarter two. But hey, wait a minute. We sold the same number of units in each quarter, and nothing changed about our cost structure. Like in reality, when we think about our direct materials, did it get cheaper for us to buy the materials to make balloons? No, nothing changed. We just spread some of that fixed overhead across more units, some of which got built up in inventory are going to be dealt with later. So, well, that's kind of weird. Now let's look at our variable costing income statement. We say, okay, now remember our variable cost product cost per unit was $37,000 times 10 units is $370,000 times 10 units is $370,000. Each quarter is exactly the same. And now our gross margins are going to be the same, but now we deal with the fixed overhead. We're treating it as a period cost, right? So we're just going to have it, I think I accidentally changed color there. We are going to have it as $60,000 in each period because we're just treating it like we would SG&A. We're not spreading it over the number of units, so the fact that we built up some inventory in quarter two doesn't change anything. We just incur $60,000 fixed in each quarter, and that's really makes more sense, right? So we're not distorting and saying, hey, quarter two is better than quarter one when really nothing changed. We sold the same number of units and had the same cost structure in each quarter, so we have the same profitability in each quarter. Now, how does this actually compute in terms of thinking about what are the advantages or disadvantages of variable versus absorption costing? Well, when we think about this, we're not creating these artificial differences with variable costing that we are with absorption costing, right? Absorption costing, we're saying, hey, this quarter we had a better quarter, when in reality, we just had an inventory buildup, and because of that inventory buildup, we ended up attaching some of that fixed overhead to inventory that's going to be dealt with later, and it just makes this quarter look better. And then that kind of gives that takes away by getting rid of that issue. We're taking away the incentive for managers to actually go and increase production just to look more profitable or to look more efficient. You know, they could just create a bunch of balloons in one quarter, just have this big inventory build up. And it actually makes it look like on a per unit basis, wow, we got our product units down on our per product unit cost. We reduced that. Now, cost of goods sold was a lot lower this quarter. You know, we're removing that incentive for managers to play those kind of games. And then we're going to have better information that we're dealing with for the higher up managers when they're evaluating what's happening. And also, variable costing is going to be easier for us to compute CVP analysis, to do cost, volume, profit. Whereas with absorption costing, sometimes we have problems with CVP due to those inventory buildup issues. And I should just say one thing that bears mentioning. So not only do we have issues when we talk about these artificial differences with the absorption costing that we get rid of when we're using variable costing. So when we have the inventory buildup, we make ourselves look more profitable that quarter or that period. But conversely, if we actually would be eating into our inventory, if we're actually selling more than the number of units that we produced that period, and we're kind of eating into our previous inventory, that's going to have the opposite effect, and that's actually going to make us look less profitable in that period when really there was no economic change. So that just bears mentioning. And then with absorption costing, at this point you might be wondering, why are we even using absorption costing? Who cares? Well, we use it for external reporting purposes. It's basically seen as the accepted method of using when we go ahead and put together an income statement. It's, you know, we kind of say, oh, well, we use the full cost method, right? We're just going to allocate all these costs to the product. It's kind of the convention that's been used for a long time. And this is something, you know, if you did the variable costing, and the auditors might be like, hey, wait a minute, actually, we're more comfortable with the full cost method. That's what all the other firms in your industry use. So basically, it's a convention for external reporting purposes, whereas variable costing is used for internal purposes because it's superior in all these ways that we mentioned.